Yeah,
Cool.
so it's really cool to speak to you, man. I just want to start by checking in, really. How's your day going so far? And bigger picture, the vibe right now, because it is what, January 16th today. What's the vibe like in Black Orchid Empire right now?
It's quite positive, really. It's been a little while since we released new music, and we're kind of like super excited to do that again. And we've been quite inspired. We've been writing quite a lot of stuff, which is cool. It's always something where you kind of, I don't know, you can either treat it like a day job where you sit down and go, I'm writing something today no matter what, or you have to kind of wait till inspiration comes. But we've been piecing bits together. We've always got big folders of new ideas, and we seem to have quite a lot of good ones coming together. So we started to kind of finish tracks off and started to get things going, and we've got some really exciting new stuff. So feeling good, really good. Should be a good year, I reckon.
It is good to hear. It's good to hear that you're feeling good about it so far. Long,
Yeah.
long way to go. A lot of stuff coming up. Of course, we'll get into that in a bit. But just
Hmm.
reflect on the last few weeks so far. I mean, January, New Year's resolution style. Is there anything that you would particularly that you do you do any New Year's resolutions, even if it's not for yourself necessarily personally, but for the band?
I find New Year's resolutions quite tricky because it's it's a sort of arbitrary mark, right? The new year is like we went around the sun again, and we all kind of really decided it's important.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's kind of it is quite useful as a symbolic and a gesture. I've never really been very good at setting myself random tasks. A lot of people are like, right, I'm gonna have a whole like lifestyle change on the first of
Yeah.
January, which seems to be asking quite a lot. I kind of feel like you have to just basically try and keep the same mindset all the time and try and develop that slowly over time. I think we're quite bad at forming habits quickly. I think it's got to take some time to form to be kind of to stick. So
Mm.
I'm a little bit nervous about setting myself goals I'm never going to be able to achieve. I wonder if that's something that isn't actually all that helpful. But it's easy to do and it's not easy to stick to.
Oh, I think you nailed it though. You say like you hit first of January and suddenly it's like, right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, and
Yeah.
it's inevitably fails and falls apart because it's very, very difficult to stick to something like that unless you were
Yeah.
pre-planning and already had things in the works. I'm always intrigued, particularly at this point, to see if anyone really has anything. But the last time we actually spoke back in April 2023. Tempest
Unbelievable.
Veritas was just released, of course, at that time. So I kind of want you
Mm.
just to reflect on that period of time. Roughly about 21 months it's been. When you
Yeah.
look back at that 21 months, are you satisfied with what you accomplished?
That's an interesting question, isn't it? Um, I think that record is really good. I really like it. I
Mm.
listen to it still, and it's something that I'm really, really proud of. I think we, supported it as best we could. We had played some great shows, went on some great tours, had a lot of fun. I think if you ever feel like you're um, not interested in improving or pushing forwards or developing what you're doing, then you get stagnant quite quickly. And I think one thing that drives most people who are sort of good at something, whether that's like learning an instrument in the first place or making music or I don't know, being good at chess, which is our other weird hobby, you you have to want to constantly improve yourself. That's kind of the point. And that leads you to always be slightly less than satisfied with everything you've done previously. Because I think the moment you start to get into like everything's perfect, you're
Mhm.
kidding yourself in some way. So I don't. What I'm trying to say is I don't think we're ever going to be happy, but I think we are happy with all the music that we've put out. It's important to think of music as like a little time capsule of a thing that was there then that you did then. It doesn't have to be relevant for your whole past and it doesn't have to be relevant for your whole future. And it's okay to have things that you put out and then outgrow. And it's also okay to have things that you feel are amazing achievements that you find hard to replicate in the future. But I think we've been happy that we've constantly progressed through our albums. I actually
Yeah.
listened the other day in the car on a long journey. I listened to like our first record again.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to do that, to go back and go, okay, so obviously a lot of stuff we've progressed a lot and we've developed some the sound of it. See, from an audio point of view, I'm always interested in that as well.
Mm.
Has improved a lot, but there's there's still cool stuff in there that you overlook because it's old. Because to you as an artist, for yourself, you think I've progressed past that. I don't need to listen to that anymore. Um, and actually getting a bit of distance from it, sometimes you're like, that's actually quite cool. Some of the stuff in there, and it feels like listening to a different band. It's so long ago, but it's always quite interesting. I think to talk about the Tempest kind of cycle. Um, I think we're really happy with that record, and I think it's going to be a really good launching point for the next one.
It felt like a really strong period, and it's not been so long. Like there does, it feels like it's carried on. Like you're still rolling. It's not like you stopped,
Mm.
so to speak, and then had some long period of downtime, and now it's starting up again. It just kind of feels like things have continued rolling on.
Yeah, we never really have downtime because when we're not making music for ourselves, we're making music with other people. That's kind of our whole livelihood.
Yeah.
So, to be honest, we're busier than ever, but it's about trying to carve out time for our own music as well. Um, and yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in lots of different kind of ways. Like we're in our new studio now, and that's really cool. And that's been a real adventure setting that up as well. But I think definitely keen to explore a little bit more now. I think and sonically as well, and just because Tempest is very concise. Each song is like sort of around that 3 minute kind of mark, and that wasn't a deliberate choice. It's just we just naturally came to the conclusion that those were the right arrangements for the majority of the time. There are some slightly longer ones, but I think now we're quite into the idea of getting a bit proggier as well in places,
Mm.
potentially exploring some other avenues, or not if we don't want to on that particular song. But I think it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. We're still in that process.
Well, obviously, at this point, we're all about the future. I know
Yeah.
you've said, and I've said it's looking very, very bright. You're gearing up to release a brand new single first, Angelfire.
Yeah.
That will kickstart this new album cycle and an announcement of a new label, Home, we should add as well.
Mm.
Let's start with the single, Angelfire. Sum up, if you can, what listeners can expect from this first taste of new music.
So obviously, the two sides of what we do have always been the kind of heaviness and the riffs and the sort of more metally parts of it, and then the melody as well. So
Hmm.
it's always going to be there, and this one is definitely a mashup of those two things. It's a really big melodic kind of anthemic chorus, but probably some of our heavier riffs that we've done as well. So that sounds like something that every band says, doesn't it? It's the heaviest one ever with the biggest
Well,
melodies and and it's like the new stuff and the old stuff all at the same time. No, we really love this one. It's really cool. It's really exciting. So we just have fun when we make a piece of music. We're always just experimenting and seeing what happens. And if we like where maybe like a riff starting point is going, then we carry on with it and we see what happens. So we don't really ever sit down and go, we're going to write this type of song now and
hmm.
this type of song another time. So we've got a few different things we've been working on that are all different. And this one just felt like a really concise, like singly song when it came together. So, but it's pretty punchy and we love it.
Did that make the decision that this would be the first, like, easy?
Yeah, yeah, it did. And so because it wasn't the first one that we wrote,
Mm.
it's one of the more recent ones that we've written. We're still in the process of writing, by the way. We're not done. So it's going to be a little while before things really kind of like come together for the whole record. But I think it's quite nice to give yourself that time. We wanted to release some stuff. We need, I think it's really important for people to have some new music from us.
Mm.
And but we're also going to take our time and make sure that the new record is as good as it can possibly be. We're definitely not going to rush to pull things together and then sort of release it next week. So it's going to be one of a stream of singles you're going to get throughout probably the next 12 months and on.
You have a plan, a long-term plan by the sound of
Yeah,
it.
we do have a plan. We try. Well, James, our manager, has a very good plan.
Thing is, man, we all know how this works now. These cycles are well beyond the whole. Here's your first couple of singles, and the album's out within 3 months. It's a long-term thing these days.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's positive as well because it gives that bands time to reflect on their music as they make it. I think that's good.
Yeah, I agree. I think so too. And particularly how music consumed these days, I think it's a totally different, totally different world now to how, when I was
Yeah.
younger and so on. But from an artist's perspective and a band perspective, it is still it's a long period and it can be very dry, particularly if you're sitting on music and you just want to get it out and move on creatively. How do you make a cycle like this fun for yourself?
We're so busy with so many projects that
Yeah.
are not just ours that it's easy because we're making our own music is like it feels refreshing every time because we're always working it in and around other stuff. So we technically will I don't know. We sort of have a general scheme, which is that at least one day of our week is focused on our own music. So it always feels like a palate cleanser. It feels like really
Mm.
fun to come back to making heavy music because a lot of our time is spent in totally different genres. which I think probably benefits our heavy stuff because I think we have like that melodic sense that comes from way more poppy sort of music than we make, and then we have the kind of it feels like fun to be able to use those really heavy elements as well. So I don't think we ever have that problem. It would be, I suppose that probably has happened before when we've finished something completely and then we've just been waiting for it to drop, and that isn't the case this time. Um, I guess it was technically the case for Tempest, but not really because there wasn't a huge gap. But some of the stuff that's on Tempest, we actually started writing before Semaphore came out, I think. So there's always this, it's never as simple as it seems as a consumer of music. You kind of feel like a band get together and make a record and then that's done. But it's usually a very unique process to each band and it's usually different. And like it's quite often you have an intermingling thing where you've got ideas you had ages ago suddenly come back and find their way into stuff now, or um, you're working on writing something when you're still in the process of talking about the previous thing, and it's all a bit of a mishmash.
Oh yes, particularly that point there. I think it's got to be 9 out of 10 interviews
Yeah,
I've done where I'm talking and here to talk about a specific thing, and it's not me, but the artist or the band themselves almost want to start talking about what they're doing next, and it's like, no, no,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
we
yeah,
have
yeah,
an album
totally.
out in a month's time. Let's focus on that.
Well, what we're doing next is this record. It's not, it's nothing else on our focus, but it's an ongoing process. Nice.
Um, Right, so fair enough. The process is still long, and all right, you're so busy that the fun factor doesn't come into it, but you do still have work to do. For example, you've got to promote, you've got to push, you've got to do videos, you've got to do
Or
lots and lots of stuff that is involved. Um, that side of things, all the promoting and all the work that goes on, then, do you enjoy that side of things?
I enjoy talking to people about what we do.
Okay.
So I think that's really fun. And if you don't enjoy that, then it would be a grind, I think. But
Mm.
I quite like just having the opportunity to discuss it. And I'm quite kind of the three of us in general are fairly cerebral about how we approach things, and it's we always have a bit of a process and a bit of an idea and a kind of concept. So that always feels like something we can explore and we can talk about. I think it's quite hard if you maybe don't have you'd have to kind of invent all of that concept to be able to talk about it, and that would be kind of drag. And I know also there's a threshold beyond which, if you've done like 3 or 4 interviews every day for months, you're definitely going to get bored of talking about the same thing. So everyone's going to reach saturation point eventually. At this stage, it just feels really fun and really new because it's like we're just at the beginning of doing that, and even some of this stuff we can't even talk about yet because it's not done, it's not finished, and that's kind of fun in its own way. So yeah, I don't mind it.
No, that's cool. It's always a fun challenge for me from a perspective of trying to come up with questions, but I know so little. And it's
Yeah,
okay, how could we talk about this? So let's talk bigger album picture then.
yeah.
Um, and particularly from a creative stance.
Hmm.
What does this particular track? So using Angelfire as the base of what I know.
Hmm.
What does that say about Black Orchid Empire and where you find yourself creatively today?
Yeah, so we always have well, certainly for the last few records, we've created a concept that we want to talk about in that record because it enables us all to contribute in a different way and it enables the songs to have kind of really interesting topics. And I think that's really important. Obviously, it's not uncommon in these genres. So whereas in Semaphore we had like a sci-fi theme to every song, and in Tempest we nicknamed it hi-fi, but it's like historical fiction. Whereas what we're looking at in the new record, that as yet untitled new record, is mythology. So it's still stories, but it's stories that are kind of passed down word of mouth, become legends, become myths. And obviously that's a broad topic and it ends up being applicable to so many different things. There's obviously very famous kind of ancient Greek legend, and then there's urban myths and things that have happened more recently and everything in between that. And it enables us to basically pick from a huge range of ideas to talk about. So Angelfire itself is from the point of view of somebody who is like obsessed with the idea of being abducted by aliens, which is
Hmm.
quite, which is kind of sounds kind of hilarious. But it's a really, if you think about what that is like, it's like a kind of religious devotion. It's like an offering to the gods, and it's like the idea of being desperate to be elevated somehow from your existence, which is an interesting topic. And we always write, so I say we because it's not just me that writes the lyrics. The other boys are very collaborative on that. In fact, we all write each other's parts and everything, and always have done. And probably the reason that we end up making things that are quite tricky to play. But the um, uh, it enables you to talk from the first person in and just completely imagine what that would be like. And that is a really big kind of blank canvas of opportunity to put interesting kind of artistic imagery in there. So it's always kind of freeing. It sounds weird because you'd imagine that a specific concept would be restrictive, but it's the opposite, really. I kind of have this theory that everybody talks from their own point of view and through their own lens of the world, whether they like it or not. And if you're being authentic, you can be authentic to yourself while still being in a fictional narrative. Um,
Hmm.
the reason that every fictional book you've ever read still speaks about the author as well as the people in their book. So I feel like there's a limit to. I think authenticity is the only capital you have in songwriting, but doesn't have to come from literal lived experience. It can be a kind of combination of imagination and imagery that's taken from other inspirations. So we get inspired by film a lot and by books, and then turn that into something that makes sense in a song. So that's been quite fun actually.
It feels broad though. I mean, concept
Mm,
is you're absolutely right. Concept can sometimes narrow things down, particularly if you're looking at a point in time or a period or something like that.
yeah,
But
yeah.
your concept feels so broad to the point where almost there would be too much to begin with. Talk to me about your particular process of narrowing it down, where your ideas were coming from, what you were looking to draw from.
So yeah, the overall sort of big brushstroke is very broad, isn't it? I mean,
Ooh.
just the idea that anything that is legend or myth, but that enables you to then narrow down into a specific thing from there. So we have another song that's based on the idea of sirens at sea, sort of singing sailors to shipwreck. Once you're in that world and you go, that's what I'm going to talk about, then all your imagery is very specific and all of your ideas are actually very sort of, they're not obvious, but they become more apparent. So I think it feels broad at first, but then you just narrow down from there. And then I guess the hard part is going to be picking only, a dozen or so specific ideas that work for specific songs. Our concept records, we've never really had the urge to make them have an overarching narrative that works through the record. They're always on a song by song basis, but just
Hmm.
under umbrella. And I think it could be something for the future that can be fun. I know that lots of bands have done that very successfully in the past, but that's when you get into real restriction, when you're like, this has
Ooh.
to be a story that starts here and ends here. I think that's happened. I remember the guys in Periphery talking about how that was quite tricky for them on a couple of the records. I think lyrically they found that quite challenging because
Yeah.
it's so like you're such a slave to that process. Then it has to make sense that way. But I don't think ours is never. It's never restrictive in that way, and I think it's whilst being broad, it's easy to narrow down at first and then kind of take it where you need it to go.
What are you doing? You're kind of like making, I don't know, like a list of, say, mythological subjects that you're like, okay, this would be a cool one. It covers the sirens, for example, and
Hmm.
aliens and another, and so on.
Hmm. Sometimes it's more based on what the musical idea feels like because our process is always um, whatever random bit of music it is first, but it'll be a musical idea that then inspires a whole arrangement,
Yeah.
and it will. It's kind of impossible to avoid having melody appear out of nowhere when you're doing that process for us. So that will happen. But the lyrics will be the last thing that happens every time. So
Mhm.
there's never a lyric before any music. So in that way, you've always got like a sort of an audio landscape that will inspire as well. So if something feels a certain way, I mean, I suppose it's always arguable as to why it feels that way, but that sometimes is quite a useful starting point. So if it feels really really dreamy, then it makes sense to do something that's kind of ethereal in the imagery. So yeah, that sometimes it's influenced by the music, but sometimes it is just a question of, oh, that would be a cool subject. We should do that.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that this particular period, the work that's going into this album, is for you a very creatively strong period? It sounds like it is.
Yeah, I mean, we've also because of our lifestyle and our kind of work ethic
Yeah.
throughout, we've always been able to set up a situation where we can get into a flow state when we need to. So we're lucky enough to make our living in music and to do it all the time. So if you do it every day, I my personal like working day is kind of like a 10 till 6 weekday and then evenings as well sometimes. But it becomes like a routine. And what's weird about flow state is you can get yourself into a routine that allows for flow state.
Hmm.
It's something you have to wait for. And actually, I think you'll probably find that a lot of people might say similar things. Sometimes I guess it might be different for other people, but if you set up a routine that allows for it, then you often find that you can access it kind of at will within that routine. So we know that when we all sit down to make a thing, we're there to do that, and it kind of triggers something in our brains that allows for that creativity to happen. It's a fairly conscious, like planned thing. It's the same when you like have writing camps and you go, right, we're all going to get together for 3 weeks and we're going to work on this thing. You've sort of set yourself up in a situation where you that could feel quite pressurized, but it's also quite
Yeah.
freeing because you don't have anything else to think about in that time. You're just making tunes. That's all you're going to do. But I think for a lot of people, maybe I used to feel like this a lot when I had like a day job that was outside of music, and I was doing that all the time. And then I'd be trying to scrape together bits of time outside of that, and it felt really precious. And like if I didn't make use of that, it would be really bad. And that kind of pressure builds up to the point where it's actually harder to create in the time that you have available. So I can definitely relate to that being problematic for people. For us, we're quite lucky where we've been able to basically engineer our whole lives around making that okay, which is quite cool.
Ah, it's very cool. It's fabulous that you have that ability to do that, the opportunity to do that, and that all
Yeah.
your hard work allows you to do it.
Yeah, it is that combination. Yeah.
Talking about the sound then, particularly what you're doing with this new album. And really, I kind of want to dive into if how much experimentation you might be finding yourself doing, ways that you're looking to push Black Orchid Empire the sound to new levels.
We're definitely experimenting. So obviously our palette has always been fairly similar. It's basically a three-piece palette. It's drums, bass, guitars. We double track the guitars, and sometimes we'll have extra guitar parts as well. So we don't kind of not too strict. Bands like Tool, for example, are fairly strict on it has to be, if the guitar's playing a solo part, there isn't really an overdub guitar a lot of the time. Those kinds of things. We don't really worry about that too much. But we do try and make it something that will be fairly simple in terms of its palette. But then where you can really get experimental is um, in the structures and the sort of styles that you're exploring. So I think we're not going to be afraid to do some fairly like long, progressive, inventive kind of sections. We're not afraid to have lots of different things happening within one song.
Hmm.
Some songs don't repeat themselves very much, for example, and I think the standard thing, some of the Angelfire is a really bad example because it's a very traditional sort of formula of like riff, verse, chorus, but then it goes off on a bit of a mad middle section. But the some of the songs don't actually use that structure at all. And structure is a thing that so you don't really get to choose the experiences that people have had. Our collective sort of consciousness when it comes to music is it knows what to expect in so many ways because it's heard millions and millions of pieces of music before. So
Hmm.
when you hear the beginning of a song and then you hear like a section that feels like it's leading somewhere, you kind of expect the chorus to happen next, and then you expect to go back somewhere else. And it's not like musicians decided on those sections and said these are the right sections. It's almost like the collective experience of everybody listening has decided what feels like it might happen next. So your choice is always whether you do what's expected or you do something different and you deliberately break that. So it can be really interesting to play with those expectations and to go, you know what, this is a satisfying journey, even though it doesn't use repetition, it just uses evolution. And then maybe some of the ideas actually do remind you a bit of stuff that happened earlier, but what technically could be a chorus is only happening like 3 minutes into the song. That can be fun. As long as for us, as long as it never feels arbitrary and it never feels like you're just making it complicated for no reason at all.
Do you ever find yourself in a position, particularly at this period, where you're doing something and it might sound great and you might be a lot of fun with it, but you realize, oh, this is not us. This isn't going to work. This isn't going to fit.
Yeah, you definitely have ideas that need to be abandoned or that just don't suit that song is more likely
Yeah.
because anything that we're putting down, we're probably going to like it because otherwise we would just not start it at all. I mean, God, there's so many examples of things that are like they never go anywhere. You start an idea and then it just isn't used. But if there's an idea, for example, maybe we had this the other day that we were writing a section of a song and it felt like it needed like a riff to come in, and we wrote it was really cool. And then we were like, you know what though, this just feels like it's the start of a whole other song. We should just take it out of there and do something else with it. That happens a lot. And you have to be brave enough to sort of do that and to throw things away that you kind of like but aren't appropriate. I think it's part of being an artist. But what helps with that is just trying really hard to not have any ego, or not have any kind of like emotional attachment to the piece of or the section or whatever, other than trying to serve the overall song and therefore the record and therefore the band. I think
Mhm.
it's kind of easy for us as a three piece. So I think if you have, for example, four, five, six-piece band, maybe there's like two guitarists, both really love their own part and want that to be the part. That's the kind of stuff that like we just avoid nicely by by having the three piece. And then also that is a drag when you get into those situations where everybody's like trying to fight for their own little bit of turf. Um,
Mm.
without even, and I'm not saying that that's a stupid or selfish thing to do, because it's kind of natural. You love your own thing, like that's you've made it, you created it for a reason.
Yeah.
And even with the best will in the world, it's quite hard to give ground in those situations. But I think that's where it can get really difficult. I think again, the amount of experience we have as producers and producing other people's music, we basically take a very objective approach to everything, even if it's stuff we are writing or we have written, because it's just sort of how we've learned to be anyway. I think having a really strong emotional attachment to something you've only just written, other than the fact that you like it because it's new, is it can be quite kind of dangerous. Because it can be, have you ever had that song where it feels like a section is repeated like 8 times because it's really fun to play, but it doesn't actually really do anything for the listener? It's like, and it can be cool, or it could be really cool live, but on a record, it's just not needed. There are different mediums as well. And if you've got the type of band that jam in a room together and then try and translate that to the studio, you can get in those situations quite a bit.
You guys keep it sensible. How very adult.
It is quite adult. It's quite boring, isn't it? It'd be more exciting if we were all fighting and swearing and throwing bottles of Jack Daniels at each other. But we actually get on like disgustingly well most of the time. So
I mean, it's wonderful to hear. That's what I want to hear as well. And it's great that you are so creatively inspired at this point because ultimately you're
Mm.
making the music and with all the work you're doing, we want you to be excited about what you're doing. So, talking about this particular period, is there anything that's particularly exciting for you personally?
You mean like in the prospect of what we might be able to do? Or...
Well, from everything that's happening around you right now, we're talking from what you're writing to what even you're doing when you're together, just every element of, I guess, this entire album building cycle.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a process which we're going to start now, which is really figuring out how things we've written translate to the live environment, which is really, and that sounds like it would be a really niggly, like annoying thing to do, but and it's hard because when you write in the studio like we do, you can quite often have basically played all the parts but never really like played them together in the right order or anything. You can end up with, it's the same as making a movie. It, you can't necessarily act an entire film out back to back in the way that you would perceive it in a movie, obviously.
Mhm.
And there's a bit of a process, but I do quite enjoy that process. The main thing I love more than anything else, which sounds really strange, is rehearsing with the guys. For me, the three of us together in our little world when we're playing in our sort of rehearsal space is really special. And it's not something that is ever shared with anyone else. It's not something that an audience ever gets access to. It's not something you're going to like live stream because the whole point is it's full of mistakes and problems. But in a way, those are really endearing and really interesting to me, especially now. I used to find it like kind of work, and now I kind of find that a really fun thing to do. It's almost like the show always, when you actually play a show, you've always got the slight anxiety of making sure everything goes right. You've got to get there. You've got all the logistics of actually touring, which are more and more complicated. Um, but rehearsals, like the only thing you have to do is play the song right. That's all anyone's asking of you. And if you get it wrong, it's not even that big of a deal because you're in rehearsal, right? So that's a nice situation. That's fun. I'm looking forward to that. That's a weird, really weird thing to look forward to, but I do.
Put your feet up, just relax. It sounds fun, absolutely.
Well, no, it's not. It's not. It's really hard work,
Of course, yeah, we
but
should
it's the
not
fun kind of hard
understate
work.
that. Same question, big picture, looking at this entire period, but the opposite side, and particularly the challenging side of things. There will be many, many things that you will have to buckle down and work hard at. Is there anything coming up that you perceive as such a challenge that you're either relishing to a degree or you're a little bit nervous about?
Um, So a couple of different bits. I think touring is really fun, but as I've said, there are logistical things that have to be overcome, and it is a lot of that's one of the more anxiety inducing parts of being a musician, I think, is
Yeah.
how to make that happen in the first place, how to make sure that people care and turn up to shows, and how to promoting stuff is, it's always got its challenges. It, it's lucky that it's one of the best feelings in the world, because otherwise nobody would ever want to do it, because
Yeah.
it's a lot of work. But when you're actually playing in front of an audience that's into what's happening, and of any size, by the way, because I've had brilliant experiences in front of like 3,000 people and 100 people and less, and it's like it's got nothing to do with it. It's whether or not you're engaging in real time with the
Mm.
people, and it's like fucking, I don't know, it's like mind reading, isn't it? It's telepathy. It's great. It really feels like you're part of a group of people all feeling the same thing at the same time, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But it's challenging. It is hard work, and getting in a van and being away from your family and doing all that other stuff. It's hard. So there's that. But that's sort of like, obviously we're very familiar with that process. It's not a new thing. The other thing that's always on my mind, because I sort of shoulder the responsibility of mixing the records and making sure they
Mm.
sound great. So I'm kind of ultimately a bit of a bottleneck for that. So there's always that pressure of like, I hope I can deliver everything that needs to get delivered, and hope I can do it in a way that sounds as good as possibly can. I'm really happy with how Angelfire sounds, so that's a good starting point. If that's
Cool.
us bar for now, then we'll be cool. And I sent it around to a couple of different people whose ears I respect, and you know, kind of went backwards and forwards a little bit. It's just actually being the person that goes, yeah, I'm done. That's always that's quite a big thing to do.
Oh wow. How'd you get there? What's the stopping point?
Do you know what? That is a really, really brilliant question, because you can't ever finish anything. So
Mm.
with music, or with, I guess, with any art, you can't really ever get to a point where you're quantifiably done, because it's always possible to change stuff. Our general rule of thumb is, if you're making changes and it's going left or right, it's going different, but not better or worse, then you're done. And if
Right.
you listen to it all, so from my point of view, because I obviously have to finish mixes all the time. If I can get through the whole track and all I feel is the song, and everything feels good to me, and this is like in any genre, as in this is within quite a technical framework, not necessarily an emotional one, but the main thing is all the technical stuff has got out of the way of the emotional stuff. So I'm not distracted by a weird pinginess to the snare, or the vocal not being quite the right level, or something obvious like that, or something small like, I don't know, maybe two things are hitting and they're supposed to be at the same time, but they're slightly not. If all of that has finished getting in my way, and I can just listen to the song and enjoy it and sort of forget about the tech, then it's done. But really, you just have to choose to say you're done. You just have to abandon it and let other people decide if they like it.
Very, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's consistent. One of the most bravest things I think for an artist to do, as you say, just walk away from it. But you talk about an emotional disconnect. How do you, right? So you can emotionally disconnect yourself, say, from work, someone else's music that you're working on. But how do you
Mm.
do that for your music?
I wouldn't say that I emotionally disconnect myself from it. I'd say that am able to exercise some objectivity in how the emotional impact of the song is going to be perceived. So I can anticipate how much that will affect a listener who's never heard it before. That's basically
Right.
the job of anybody who's making any kind of on the technical side. So any producer or mix engineer or whatever, they're trying to anticipate, and they're not doing it in some magic way. They're doing it in, does it make me feel this way? Most of the time. I think that's why Rick Rubin has been so successful, because he basically hears music like most people hear music, which is to say, as a consumer, he just hears it, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. He's not a technical person at all. And the problem with being a technical person is, if you want to, you can really fixate on anything. That's kind of the point of, if you're a mix engineer and you need to really listen to the hi-hat for like 20 minutes, you can do that. You've been very, very, you're training your brain to focus on that one thing. And then afterwards you're like, well, now all I hear is hi-hat. So it's about learning to unpick that. And so yeah, I just apply the same ethos that I do, whether it's music I've been a part of creating, or only been a part on the sort of technical side. It's the same thing, which is I'm trying to anticipate the impact of of the piece of music, and is it doing the job it's supposed to do? And if you think about it, although there is a difference when you're writing stuff for yourself,
Hmm.
it's sort of a similar process whether you're writing for yourself or for someone else. You're doing something that you feel on gut instinct is cool, and you feel that it will have a good emotional impact on somebody because it does on you. And if you don't feel any emotional impact from something you're creating, there's a huge chance that nobody else will. So, I think that's all you're really ever trying to do. I actually think it's not as difficult as you might think it would be. But then I think people have different levels of emotional investment in their own music as well. So I guess
Course.
if I was creating music but I was not involved in production at all, so I was just like writing it on guitar and saying, someone else is going to produce, I'd probably be way more invested in the emotional side of it because I'm giving it away instantly. So I think the lack of control makes it harder to be objective. But yeah, it's not something I ever really consciously, I'd probably rely on other people's opinions a little bit more right at the end, just to make sure that
Yeah.
I'm not going mental. Because when you've got like 12 songs that you've co-written, I should say, and then, recorded and mixed and really worked on for ages, your objectivity levels are pretty low. So you do have to get other people's opinions. But I think that's the only crutch really.
Who do you look to? Family, friends?
Mm. If I want an opinion about something in a very non-technical way, I'll definitely ask like, family or friends. If my wife says to me like, "What's that weird sound?" and it means she means the snare drum, then something very bad has happened. But actually, she's listened to so many things I've done. She's probably not a very good objective person. Anyway, yeah, it's the classic thing of like, if your mum likes it, that means it's bad, right? The yeah, I would definitely want opinions, but I also am lucky enough to know quite a lot of people whose opinions I trust in a like technical way. So like other mix engineers or mastering engineers or other producers or other people in bands. I think that's always really useful.
Well, thankfully, your listener base, your fan base, seems to have such great faith in you. The excitement already for what is coming it's incredible. And over the years, you built up this incredible fan base, a sizable listener base who are constantly excited and interested in what you're doing, and very supportive, it seems too. I look and I troll and I try to understand what's going on in your social media, as fun as that is. And it seems as well as the music, everybody is super stoked for obviously the upcoming tour as well. End of
Mm.
Feb through March into April, all over the UK. Not going to list every single bloody date because you're all over the UK, but my hometown, London, is one of them on March 9th at the Black
Right.
Heart. So if you are in London, be there for that. And I personally have always felt like Black Orchid Empire, as great as you are on record, live is where it is out.
Mm.
At, sorry. And I absolutely love when you see you play it live. The question is, what's the chances of us seeing new music debuted on this tour?
Very high, as long as we can
Mm.
learn how to play it in time. And I do mean that, like, we are probably going to start learning how to play Angelfire. Now, of course, we do know how to play it. We just don't know how to play it really well yet. So that's the next thing. Yeah, man, we're going to try and get that tune together because I'm really hoping that everyone will have had a chance to listen to it and we can put it in the set. And it will hopefully be a fun thing for everybody, unless we get it really wrong. We'll find out.
Yeah, I figured as much. I can't wait. I can't wait. Plenty of time to sort all of that. Plenty of time
Oh
to
yeah,
learn it. Plenty of time to get excited. It's going to be an incredible year. It already feels like it's going to be an incredible year, and I cannot wait to see what comes next. We'll wrap it up here. I'm going to give you the rest of your day back. Thank you for giving me 40 minutes of your time. Really appreciate it, Paul.
absolute pleasure, mate.
Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. It does help us out. You can find us at gbhbl.com and across all social media platforms. And if you really want to give us a bit of extra support, please consider buying us a cup of coffee over on our coffee page. Thank you.